The soft hum of the airplane filled the cabin, blending with the quiet conversations of passengers settling into their plush first-class seats. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air as flight attendants moved gracefully, ensuring everything was in order. For Jordan Carter, a 12-year-old boy with a sharp mind and a quiet confidence, this was more than just a flight. It was his first time traveling alone, a reward from his father for his dedication to school. He had worked hard for this, and as he slid into seat 3A, he felt a sense of pride. The leather seat was smooth beneath his fingers as he adjusted his backpack beside him. Outside the window, the airport runway stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun. Everything seemed perfect, until it wasn't. A shadow loomed over him. "Excuse me, young man," a firm voice interrupted his thoughts. Jordan looked up. A flight attendant, a middle-aged woman with a stiff posture and piercing eyes, stood over him. Her name tag read Ms. Donovan. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" she asked, her voice polite, but with an edge that made his stomach tighten. Jordan nodded, reaching into his hoodie pocket. He pulled out his ticket and held it up. "Seat 3A, first class. No mistake." Ms. Donovan barely glanced at it before shaking her head. "I don't think so," she said, her tone firmer now. "This seat is reserved for first-class passengers." Jordan blinked, confused. "But this is my seat." The woman's lips twitched as if suppressing a sigh. She leaned in slightly. "Where are your parents?" His fingers clenched around his ticket. He wasn't expecting this. He wasn't being rude. He wasn't causing trouble. "I'm traveling alone," he said, his voice steady, though he could feel the heat rising to his cheeks. A silence settled between them. A few passengers turned their heads, their gazes flickering between the boy and the flight attendant. Some whispered. Others chose to look away. Ms. Donovan straightened her back. "There must have been a mistake," she said. "You need to take your things and move to economy." Jordan felt something twist in his stomach. He had never been made to feel small before. This wasn't just a mistake. This was something else. And what Ms. Donovan didn't know, what no one in that cabin knew, was that her assumption would cost her everything, because Jordan's father wasn't just anyone, and before this flight was over, she would learn exactly who she had just messed with. Jordan sat frozen in his seat, his grip tightening around the ticket. He could feel the weight of the moment, the unspoken tension settling in the air like a thick fog. "But I have my ticket," he said, his voice quieter this time, almost like he was trying to convince himself that this wasn't happening. Ms. Donovan didn't budge. "I don't know how you got it, but this seat isn't for you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Now let's not make a scene. Gather your things." Jordan swallowed hard, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He wasn't being difficult. He wasn't causing trouble. So why did it feel like everyone in first class was waiting for him to fail? Passengers nearby shifted in their seats. Some pretended not to hear. Others exchanged glances but said nothing. No one stood up for him. Not a single person. His hands trembled as he reached for his backpack, his fingers brushing against the smooth leather of the armrest one last time. With slow, uncertain movements, he stood, feeling every pair of eyes in the cabin on him. As he stepped into the aisle, Ms. Donovan simply turned and gestured toward the back of the plane. Like he didn't belong. Like he was an intruder in a place he was never supposed to be. The walk felt endless. Row after row of wealthy passengers watched him pass, some with polite indifference, others with thinly veiled curiosity. And yet still, no one spoke up. Finally, he reached economy. The seats were tighter, the air felt different. The hum of the plane seemed louder, almost suffocating. Jordan sank into an empty seat near the window. His body felt heavy, weighed down by something he couldn't quite name. He stared at his phone screen for a long moment. Then, finally, he typed. "They made me move, said I couldn't sit in first class. I had my ticket. She didn't believe me." The reply came almost instantly. "Who made you move?" His father's message was short, sharp, not panicked, but focused. Jordan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then, slowly, he typed the words. "The flight attendant." A long pause, then another message. "What's the flight number?" Jordan exhaled, his fingers shaking slightly as he typed it out and hit send. Another message came. "Stay where you are, I'll handle it." Jordan swallowed. He wasn't sure what his father meant, but something about those words told him this wasn't over, not even close. Jordan sat still, gripping his phone like it was a lifeline. His father's last message echoed in his mind. "Stay where you are, I'll handle it." He didn't know what his father planned to do, but something told him that Ms. Donovan had just made the biggest mistake of her career. Meanwhile, at the front of the plane, Ms. Donovan walked back toward the galley, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips. Another problem solved. She adjusted her uniform, brushing off the moment like it was just another routine correction. But Nicole, a younger flight attendant, wasn't so sure. She had watched everything. The way Ms. Donovan dismissed the boy's ticket without even checking the system. The way she barely let him speak before deciding he didn't belong. It didn't sit right. Trying to mask her discomfort, Nicole cleared her throat. "Was there a problem with his ticket?" she asked, her voice careful. Ms. Donovan scoffed, grabbing a water bottle from the counter. "Please," she said, rolling her eyes. "You saw him? Do you really think he paid for first class?" Nicole's stomach twisted. "I mean, first class is for anyone who books it, right?" she said hesitantly. Ms. Donovan gave a short, humorless laugh. "I've been doing this for 20 years, sweetheart. I know when someone's in the wrong place. Trust me." Nicole bit her tongue. She wanted to push back, wanted to say something, but she knew better. Ms. Donovan had seniority, she had authority, and no one questioned her. So Nicole let it go, for now. But then the intercom crackled to life. "Ms. Donovan, please report to the cockpit immediately." The galley fell silent. Nicole's breath hitched. That wasn't normal. Flight attendants weren't called to the cockpit unless something was serious. Ms. Donovan stiffened, glancing toward the front of the plane. For the first time that day, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. Still, she straightened her shoulders and smoothed her uniform before heading toward the cockpit, trying to keep her expression neutral. But when she stepped inside, the entire atmosphere shifted. The captain, a seasoned pilot with graying hair, turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, but he wasn't alone. On the in-flight phone screen, a man sat in a high-rise office, his hands folded neatly in front of him. His presence alone sent a chill down Ms. Donovan's spine. Because even though she had never seen him in person, she knew exactly who he was. Isaac Carter, the owner of the airline, and the father of the boy she had just humiliated. Ms. Donovan's breath hitched. The captain's voice was firm, leaving no room for doubt. "You removed Mr. Carter's son from first class without verifying his ticket, without checking the system, without reason." The blood drained from her face. Isaac Carter leaned forward, his eyes sharp, his tone calm but cutting. "You are going to turn around, walk back to economy, and personally return my son to his seat." A long pause. "And when this flight lands?" His next words made her knees weak. "You will explain yourself to the executive board." The screen went dark. For the first time in her career, Ms. Donovan felt something she had never felt before: panic. Donovan stood frozen in the cockpit, her mind racing. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding. But the cold, unreadable stare of the captain told her otherwise. This was happening. She had removed Isaac Carter's son, the son of the airline's owner, from first class without even checking his ticket. And now she had to fix it. Slowly, almost mechanically, she turned and stepped out of the cockpit. As she walked back down the aisle toward economy, she felt something she never had before: eyes on her. Passengers who had ignored the incident before were suddenly watching her every move. Some whispering, some smirking. For the first time, she was the one being judged, and she hated it. Finally, she spotted him. Jordan sat by the window, his face calm, his posture relaxed, not angry, not upset, just waiting. The way he sat there, completely composed, made her uneasy, because this boy knew something she didn't, something she had failed to see before. He had power. She cleared her throat, crouching slightly to his level, her voice quieter than before. "Sir," she said, forcing a thin smile. "There's been a misunderstanding. I'd like to escort you back to your original seat in first class." Jordan blinked, tilted his head slightly. "A misunderstanding?" he echoed. Passengers around them stirred. Some leaned in closer, pretending not to listen, but hanging on every word. Ms. Donovan nodded quickly, eager to move past this. "Yes, there was an error in seating," she said. "We'd like to correct it now." Jordan didn't move, didn't even reach for his backpack. Instead, he simply watched her, his silence stretching longer than she was comfortable with. Then casually, he reached for his phone. A moment later, her work tablet vibrated, her stomach tightened. Slowly, she pulled it out, her fingers shaking slightly as she read the message forwarded from the airline's executive office. "Take your time. Make her understand what she did." Her breath hitched. She swallowed hard and looked back at Jordan, whose gaze hadn't wavered. He wasn't the one who should be nervous. She was. Ms. Donovan opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain herself, but no words came out. Because for the first time, she wasn't in control, and she didn't know how to fix it. Ms. Donovan could feel her heart pounding against her chest. The weight of every passenger's gaze pressed down on her like a force she had never felt before. She had spent years making the rules, setting the standards, enforcing them. But today, she was the one being held accountable, and Jordan Carter knew it. He hadn't yelled, he hadn't caused a scene, he had simply waited. Now she stood before him, feeling smaller than she ever had before. Jordan's calm stare unsettled her. "I'll go back," he finally said, his voice smooth and steady. Ms. Donovan exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. But before she could speak, Jordan's next words froze her in place. "But first, I want to know why—" A hush fell over the cabin. Ms. Donovan felt the blood drain from her face. "Why what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jordan leaned forward slightly. "Why did you think I didn't belong here?" A murmur rippled through the passengers. A few turned their heads, exchanging glances. Ms. Donovan's mouth felt dry. She couldn't answer, because no answer would make this right. Passengers were waiting, watching, expecting her to say something, but all she could do was stand there, silent. Jordan waited, just long enough for the discomfort to sink in. Then, without another word, he grabbed his backpack, stood up, and walked back to first class. But as he passed Ms. Donovan, he did something she didn't expect. He looked at her, really looked at her, not in anger, not in arrogance, just in acknowledgement, like he saw exactly who she was and wanted her to see it too. That made it worse, because he wasn't the one who should feel ashamed. She was. Jordan sat back in seat 3A, adjusting his hoodie like nothing had happened. He reached for the in-flight magazine, flipping through it casually, like this was just another day. For him, maybe it was. For Ms. Donovan, it was a day she'd never forget. But her lesson wasn't over yet. Ms. Donovan stood frozen as Jordan took his rightful seat, back in first class. The plane's hum felt deafening now. She had spent years walking through these aisles, controlling the cabin, making decisions without question. But today, she wasn't the one in control. She turned stiffly and walked back toward the galley, but every step felt heavier than the last. Passengers who had ignored the scene earlier now watched her closely. Some with disapproval, others with quiet satisfaction. And then, as if the universe itself had delivered the final blow, the intercom crackled to life. "Ms. Donovan, please remain on board after all passengers have disembarked." Her stomach tightened. She knew what that meant. Her career, her reputation, everything she had built was on the line. For the first time, she truly understood what it felt like to be judged, to have one decision change everything, to feel small. And Jordan? He didn't gloat. He didn't demand an apology. He didn't even look back, because he didn't have to. She had already lost. As the plane touched down and passengers began collecting their belongings, Ms. Donovan stood still, her mind spinning. One by one they exited. Some cast quick glances her way, others didn't acknowledge her at all. Then Jordan stood. He slung his backpack over his shoulder, adjusted his hoodie, and walked toward the exit. As he passed her, he paused, just for a second. Ms. Donovan looked at him, desperate to say something, anything that might make this moment feel less humiliating. But before she could speak, Jordan simply gave her a small nod. Not in forgiveness, not in anger, just in acknowledgement of what had happened. And then he stepped off the plane. A second later, the security officer stepped inside. "Come with me." The walk she had taken 1,000 times before now felt like a march toward the unknown. She had walked these airport halls for years, always confident, always in charge, but today, for the first time, she understood exactly why she was being watched. What happened that day wasn't just about a mistake. It was about assumptions. About how one snap judgment can humiliate someone, strip them of dignity, and leave a lasting impact. And it's a reminder for all of us, how we treat others, especially when we think no one is watching, matters. If this story made you think, leave a comment below. What would you have done if you were on that flight? Hit the like button, share this video, and make sure to subscribe so you never miss a real-life story that challenges the way we see the world. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next powerful story, because every story has a lesson, and we're here to share them. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.